When mental illness makes the news in the U.S., it's often in the context of violent tragedy, like the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting or the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut.
He obviously has some mental health issues, so for him to even have access to those guns is a little scary to me.
Important factors in those incidents, to be sure, but a new study from Johns Hopkins University shows that news coverage may exaggerate the relationship between mental illness and violence.
We looked at the content of news media coverage about mental illness in a sample of print and television U.S. news sources. And we found that the majority of news coverage of mental illness over a 20-year period from 1995 to 2014, a large proportion of that news coverage focused on a link between mental illness and interpersonal violence.
From 1995 to 2014, violence against others or suicide was the focus in 55% of news stories that mentioned mental health, but only 4% of violence in the U.S. is directly connected to mental illness. The Johns Hopkins study concludes skewed news coverage contributes to stigmatizing mental health issues, making it less likely for people to seek treatment, and it impacts public perception of mental illness.
When the public thinks that most people with mental illness are more likely to be violent than the general public, we have evidence showing that that type of stigmatizing attitude makes them less likely to support policies that would benefit people with mental illness, policies like expanding community-based mental health treatment.
By contrast, only 14% of news stories about mental illness focus on successful treatment. The study suggests journalists should cover more stories about the successful treatment of mental illness. The research suggests that if those stories were covered more prominently, the stigma around mental illness would be reduced and more people might seek out treatment. Jim Spellman, CCTV, Washington.